Hello, and welcome to Dig It. I'm Peter Brown, and hosting the show with me today is Chris Day. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Peter.
This is our first episode, and we thought we'd take this opportunity to introduce ourselves, give you a bit of background on us and who we are, and give you a little bit of information on the programme and what we're going to be talking about over the following year.
It's going to be exciting, isn't it?
I'm looking forward to it, Chris. I've never done a podcast before.
Right. Let's go.
Okay, so Chris, you're a bit ahead of me with this, with regards to broadcasting. I believe you've already been behind the microphone, haven't you?
Yeah, for a few years for BBC Radio Solent down in Southampton, and more recently for Three Counties Radio, just over in Luton. So yes,
quite local then.
Definitely.
So tell us a bit about yourself, Chris. What got you into gardening?
Oh gosh, the recollections when you're young, isn't it? I remember helping my mum and dad in the garden when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Okay. I can just remember loads of turf being delivered one day and see this mountain of soil and helping with pushing my little wheelbarrow around the garden, trying to help or hinder. My recollections of trying to grow some vegetables, and I remember growing some tomatoes when I was young. But also the most distinct recollection is fragrance. My mum and dad loved sweet peas, which I love now, but it was dianthus, good old garden pinks, because I think I was so small and we used to grow them in a raised bed. My nose really did touch them as I was walking past.
Well, certainly I think one of the joys of summer and spring to me is when you walk past certain plants, and it always amazes me, things that you most of the year just think, oh, it's a funny old green bush, why are people growing that? And
yeah.
I mean, an example of that was an Eleagnus that I'd always thought Eleagnus, yeah, they're fairly pretty, but a bit green, they don't sort of shrubby things, they make a nice hedge, but other than that, what's the point in them? And then a few years ago, I walked past the one in my garden, and the smell was amazing.
Fantastic.
It really captivates you sometimes, doesn't it?
It does. And the thing is with Eleagnus, of course, you can't really see the flowers. They're very small, very insignificant, aren't they? Yeah, you see the leaves, and the smell is a bonus, but a lovely shrub.
Tell us a little bit about your technical career, as it were. Where did you start?
My journey. Yeah, I started after leaving school with a couple of A levels. I wasn't. After leaving school, I decided to do an apprenticeship in commercial horticulture, far removed from working in a retail garden centre. And it certainly is. And I worked at a company called Rochford's Houseplants, which many of our listeners will know the name. They're
a big houseplant supplier, aren't they?
Yes, they were. And it was actually Mr. Thomas Rochford who coined the term houseplant. He was that important in 1947, I think, if you remember, so just over the war years, and they were instrumental. They brought us the rubber plant, the spider plant, the money tree, all those favourites of the 1960s and 70s into our homes, and of course now houseplants are having a massive revival with all the millennials.
They are, because certainly those of us, unfortunately, who had to stay at home due to the outbreak of COVID, and obviously had a lot more time to spend in the house, and growing houseplants I personally find quite fun. I got into orchids a few years ago, and I'm always amazed that sort of every year now I get them back into flower. I use a very simple sort of dunk it once a week regime, and to start off with it was straight under the tap, and they did okay, but now I've sort of learnt that it's far better to give them rainwater, so I collect rainwater and I put a little bit of fertilizer in them from Growth Technology, and make sure that I don't leave them in a bucket of water overnight. I only give them sort of a quick 15-20 minute bath each, and spray the foliage every now and again with a sort of mister, and it really does make a difference. I mean, plants, I personally find fantastic because most of them will try and live whatever you do to them. So
that's it.
Even the likes of me, who sometimes don't give them the perfect environment to grow in.
Well, remember, most houseplants are killed by kindness. That's the thing. That's the statistic everybody mentions, and it's very true. It's interesting, you mentioned about orchids, Peter, that when I was doing my apprenticeship in the late 70s, early 80s, orchids were very deemed as exotic and very expensive. A moth orchid, which we probably retail for sort of £15-20, then would have been £80 to £100. So different times. I mean, the most popular houseplants at that time were things like begonias and chrysanthemums, African violets. You're fairly standard fare, perhaps. But now we've got so much more interesting varieties and species, obviously from further afield. But one little factoid about orchids is the fact that the UK now grows the most moth orchids, more than the Dutch. So most of the ones you tend to buy in garden centres and I have to say elsewhere aren't necessarily grown in Holland. So we've got a very burgeoning orchid business out there.
That's really interesting because I'd always imagined they come from sort of more exotic climes like Indonesia or India or somewhere like that, but they're actually, most of them or a lot of them are grown in the UK now.
That's it. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And you went to college, didn't you, Chris?
Yeah, that's right. I went up to Preston, a college called Myerscough, and I did my national diploma in horticulture. And it was great fun. I think horticulture, when you're in a learning environment, you have your favourite subjects and your least favourite. My least favourite was machinery and arboriculture. I always used to forget the knots when I was climbing trees, which was always a bit embarrassing for the tutor, but we'll pass over that. And then, of course, it was a good opportunity to learn garden centre retailing because I took the option to do garden centre retailing, not realising that it was going to be the path which led me to my job at Buckingham Garden Centre.
So you started all-in-one, didn't you?
That's right, yeah, all-in-one garden centre up in Rochdale. Fond memories of that garden centre, family run, very much like Buckingham.
Because they've got a similar claim to fame that they've just had their 50th anniversary.
They have indeed, yes. And I was with them for just over 12 years, and obviously I came very fresh out of college and quite a new environment. But it was a garden centre where we like to do things a little bit differently. And my boss there, Dave, he was very pushy at getting involved in competitions and doing all that sort of stuff. So we forged some interesting links with the Garden Centres Association very early on, and even going to the Chelsea Flower Show, which I never thought I'd go, and we actually picked up a medal, which was quite amazing. So these opportunities you get, and it was great. It was great fun. I really enjoyed those years.
And then from there, you moved into media.
Yeah, it was a bit of a change of direction. I wanted to try and... I've always fancied doing some writing. And actually, when I was working at Rochford's, I did do a little bit of writing for a couple of magazines. And one of them was Amateur Gardening magazine. And I saw a job advert came up in, I think, 1993. And it was a time in my life where I think I wanted to change. So I bit the bullet and managed to get an interview and became a sub-editor on the magazine for about 4.5 years. And again, that obviously geographically I moved from Rochdale down to sunny Poole, and that was good fun, obviously learning about what you could grow in nice warm gardens near the sea. And it was a great experience, and it meant that you could do some interesting things working on a magazine. So
was the maritime climate sort of a little bit warmer, and you're suddenly able to grow things that couldn't do up north?
Yeah, lots of exotics, lots of palms, and we plant palms or dracaenas in our gardens in this part of Buckinghamshire, North Bucks, and they grow quite well. My word, that part of the world, they double their size each year. It's quite amazing. You never see any snow really in that part of Dorset, or a few cold nights perhaps. So yeah, very good for gardening.
So the Gulf Stream really does keep it a bit warmer.
Most definitely, yes.
And then from amateur gardening, you moved on to another.
Yeah, so I was, I think in the trade you're headhunted, but I got an opportunity to launch a gardening magazine. So I moved from amateur gardening and worked on and started a magazine called Garden Ideas, which was originally was a bi-monthly magazine, then went monthly. It did quite well. on the book stands. So I got to get involved in commissioning articles, doing the whole works, which was scary. It was fun. It was very time consuming. It became a labour of love, but it was a fantastic sort of nearly 2 years of my life, which I'll never forget, and an opportunity which, don't come along at all that often. And of course, it was then, Peter, that I actually found about Buckingham Nurseries.
So were we advertising in the magazine for the mail order business? Or was
Well, that's interesting. Yes, 1 or 2 ads went into the magazine. However, we used to do a feature called Shopping with the magazine, and it was like 4 or 6 pages where we'd actually go out to a garden centre or a nursery and take some shoppers along and try and infuse them with lots of information. Very much like we're going to hopefully do with our podcast, to give them lots of information and lots of tips and things. And I saw Buckingham Nurseries. I thought, perhaps we should do something on hedging plants. So I popped down with a photographer, and I remember meeting Pauline and having a wander around and being totally enthused by what were we doing at the nursery here. And we got a really nice, interesting article. Well, 6 pages of article actually out of it. So it was a good thing, and it was a good way of pushing the whole idea of that. Not all hedging plants have to be green and be called Lalandi.
Yes, we do have quite a range here, don't we?
We do.
And,
yeah.
It's certainly
a
interesting part of the business. So the garden centre, when you came to see it, Chris, it must have been in winter time. Obviously, like I say, the hedging business is a significant part of the company. Obviously, to give you a bit of a history about the garden centre, my grandfather started the business, or had a business in Byron Hill back in 1950. After the war, he started life as I think it was a sort of barrow boy, working in vegetable markets in London.
Excellent, right.
And had various other sort of little jobs on the side, but he had a massive passion for alpines, which then grew into a nursery and then eventually a garden centre stroke nursery, and that was in Byron Hill. Then my father sort of had finished college and decided that he wanted to sort of continue in the garden centre industry, and so they moved the business up to the site we have here at Buckingham, in the outskirts of Buckingham, and that was obviously 50 years ago, and has grown ever since. I mean, originally, I can remember photos of the site as essentially just a field with not an awful lot on it. And we've got pictures of my parents sort of laying out the original plant beds, and there was like gravel paths, and the first building was a...
Was it terrapin?
Terrapin is a glorified shed, I think, is a better word.
Great word,
describe it. A terrapin building.
Yeah.
And then that moved on to sort of a brick building, and then the brick building became too small, and so that it got enlarged and grew. And the site's grown and grown and grown.
So can you remember your first recollections here then, Peter, as a youngster?
Yes, I guess the thing that really sticks in my mind was when I was, I'm going to say 8-9 years old, pushing customers' trolleys out to their cars in the hope of getting a tiny little tip. I can remember sort of back in those days in the early 80s, tipping was still quite common in this country, and if I earned 10 pence for lifting 3 bags of compost into a customer's car, I was really chuffed, and I can remember at the end of the day, if I'd earned 50p, that was a really good day.
That was a result.
So, that was a good day's work, because my parents never paid me. I don't think they do now, but anyway. Yeah.
I don't believe that.
But yeah, I mean, the early days of the garden centre, the likes of bags of compost. I mean, the one that sticks in my mind was Shamrock Irish Moss Peat. They were huge, great bales, sort of 200-litre bales that you had to have 2 people to lift into the car, because they were big. And I think the nursery at that stage was using 300-litre bales. And I can remember sort of making compost in the compost machine, and you'd have to get these huge, great bales onto the edge of the machine, cut them and split them open, and then mix in the Osmocote and the lime.
That's right. Oh, yes.
All these,
So good.
chemicals and fertilizers to make the right mix, and then it would sort of tumble out the other end where you put a tray of P9s through,
Pots.
and then obviously put the seeds in, and then carry them through to the greenhouse where you put a sheet of glass over them and come back.
So Buckingham was quite a commercial little nursery at that point then.
Yes. I mean, my first memories of the garden centre there was sort of the greenhouses, and then there were the seasonal, the sort of polytunnels, which were for growing plants, and then that was sort of for the garden centre side, and then the other side of the business was the field, which was ploughed up every autumn, loads of trenches dug, and the yard would fill up with bundles and bundles and bundles of hedging. I can remember my father telling me that once he had it worked out how long a hedge we could have made if we'd put all the hedging plants we'd sold sort of end to end, and it had got halfway to the moon.
Wow!
By the last time, but I mean that was many years ago. He told me that, so hopefully we've actually made enough hedging now to get us to the moon.
Fantastic, yeah. But then we plant a lot of hedging in this country, don't we? Thank goodness.
Yeah, I mean hedges are so much better than little fences and things like that. They give you a windbreak. They give nature somewhere to live and hide and shelter, and obviously help oxygenate the earth and
reduce those CO2 emissions as well, don't they? So what about working?
So yes, I went to school and then went to Pershore. After Pershore Horticultural College, I then came to the garden centre, and I worked in the houseplant department for a short while, and then went down to the mail order department and worked as a bundler.
What's a bundler?
A bundler. So that's where you get to drive the tractor up the field with a trailer on the back, pull bundles of hedging, so maybe 25 quickthorn 2 to 3 foot or something like that, and 50 beech or whatever the bundles are, and then you take them all back and put them in the shed, split them all up into the individual orders, so then from there the packers could then come and pick the crates which were filled of the bundles of hedging.
Great stuff.
Off they
good
went.
Old traditional workings of a nursery. It's so good to hear.
It was cold, it was in the wind, it was obviously the winter time, so you'd have 2 jumpers and gloves and agricultural and the sort of horticultural work outside is it's not for the faint-hearted, I'd say. It's sort of one of those things that, as us gardeners know, you do have to suffer the elements, but equally we get to enjoy the lovely fresh air, and in the summer there's nothing better than working outside in the sun,
especially in these COVID times as well.
I think that's it. I mean, certainly one of the benefits of being at home potentially for some people has been the amount of time they've been able to spend in the garden.
Indeed.
And doing those little things around the house that they hadn't done before.
Moving on then,
So, from the mail order department, my passion, certainly from about the age of 7 or 8, I think I had my first goldfish tanks. It was basically aquatics and keeping fish, and I started the aquatics department here and got that up and going. From the aquatics department, I also have a love of food and got involved with the restaurant and helping run the restaurant and getting fed. And then from that, the position of the general manager came up, and the previous general manager suggested I'd be good in that post. So I got the role as general manager here at the garden centre, and have been enjoying doing that for quite a few years now.
Excellent.
So that's a little bit about me.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter.
So, Chris, Dig It podcast. What are we going to be discussing this year?
Yeah, over the next 12 months, Peter, we've got a lot of subjects, actually, from ornamental gardening to fruit and veg to houseplants and everything in between. I think the whole the preface of what we're trying to do is to try and obviously get the best out of our wonderful guests we've got lined up as well, to try and enthuse and educate and inform, and hopefully get a sense of sort of enjoying and sharing our passion for gardening.
Chris, it always amazes me whenever I ask you a question, you seem to know the answer.
Oh, I don't.
And I think it would be very good for us to be able to share some of that knowledge with our with people, and I'm really looking forward to learning a little bit about how I should be looking after my plants.
Yeah, and I think Peter as well. We're always learning, and that's the great virtue of obviously talking to the experts and guests we've got coming up. We're going to learn so much out of that, and hopefully our listeners will enjoy that and take something away from that. So plenty coming up over the next 12 months.
Brilliant. And one thing that we're very keen to do is obviously answer the right questions. So if you've got any questions, please come onto our website. There's a page on the website which is dedicated to the podcast. On the website, there's a form that you can fill in. On the website will be our contact address, so you can send us your questions, and hopefully we'll know the answers and be able to answer them. Yeah. The program for our podcast we will be publishing. If you've got a question relating to any of those, obviously we'll try and tie it in with that. There'll also be some regular monthly updates. So we'll be doing podcasts covering what you need to be thinking about doing in the following sort of month. So hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions in relation to when it's relevant.
Indeed, yes. And also, if when you're sending over your questions, there'll be an opportunity if you've got any, you'll need any plant identifications or any pest and disease problems, obviously take a photograph and we can obviously accommodate those as well. But it's very much your podcast as much as ours.
So yes, we look forward to hearing from you. So our next podcast, Chris, what's that all about?
Right, okay, so we're going to be looking at the wonderful world of growing potatoes.
Okay.
Everybody's favourite, well, it is everybody's favourite vegetable in some form or other. And we're going to be joined by an expert, a potato guru by the name of John Marshall. We look forward to speaking to him very soon.
Brilliant. Well, we look forward to having you along for that, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Chris. Our thanks today goes to Chiltern Music Therapy for providing the music for our show.
At Chiltern Music Therapy, we want everyone to know the difference that music can make in their lives. From parents and their premature babies in hospital to grandparents with dementia. We provide music therapy and community music services to people of all ages and needs across England. We work both digitally and in person in people's homes, care homes, schools, hospitals and hospices. Find out more at chilternmusictherapy.co.uk.